Good afternoon, everybody. So just a couple things to go over today. And then, oh, there's Blake. We'll let him in. Hi, Blake. We're just getting started. Oh, and Sabrina. And I think that's everybody I was expecting today. There's a couple more on the roster, but very rarely see them at 1 o'clock. Okay, so hello, everybody. It's probably going to be kind of a short day. I mean, as far as our block in the schedule is 4 hours. We're not going to take all that. So we'll have a lot of lab time today to go over stuff. And the stuff, a lot of the stuff for today is something you're definitely going to want to practice with. Does anybody have any questions before we jump into the material for today? Okay, so to start with here, it's just a little spiel I like to give in every class that I teach. Because if you're in this class, then you're kind of planning on a computer-based career. You're planning on sitting at a desk working on a computer for long hours, right? Maybe a 40-hour work week, 60-hour work week. A lot of time spent sitting at a computer or sitting at a desk working on a computer. Oh, Sabrina said she can't hear me. Can anybody else hear? Can you all hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good. I had that happen in another class the other night. I think I must have accidentally hit something on my computer. Yeah,
okay.
I left and came back, and it worked.
That's what she's doing right now. Yeah, sometimes little things like that happen. Yeah, if things start to cut out, please let me know immediately, because most people, most of y'all have your mics muted and your videos off, so that if something freezes up, I can't really see. The screen still looks exactly the same. I guess we'll wait for her to get back. Well, okay, so like I was saying, if you're in here, you're planning on a desk job, basically. Sitting at a desk, working on the computer, pays really well. It's a good job, but it is a terrible thing for the human body. The human body should not be sitting stationary for long. We're dynamic creatures. We do best when we move. Can you hear me now, Sabrina? I don't know if she can. Let me check. Can you hear me now? Hope she can hear me. Along those lines, it's like something you may have heard about with exercise, right? That's one that often shows up. Yeah, it might be a setting got changed, or something else on your computer is muted. As far as I can tell, everything looks like it's working. Yeah, so something you may have heard with exercise, a common thing with exercise is that often shows up when people go to, maybe think they want to lose weight and start exercising. But exercise alone, we don't really lose much weight. Okay. Our bodies are incredibly efficient at what they do. Our bodies are incredibly efficient at moving. Like if you get on a rowing machine and go really hard for 20 minutes, you barely burn any more calories than you would just existing. Our bodies are very, very good at what they do. And that includes movement and stuff. And when we don't move and sit at a desk, it kind of takes a toll on our body. And not just that, there's some other stuff, this equipment we use. Which one should I start with? I'll start with the mouse. I forgot to bring my name. Let me grab my mouse. everybody's familiar with these things, right? We use these all the time. And this is a good example. One of the things I like to point out is that in order to hold this, just hold it to put it up here for the camera. I can't hold it in the position I would use it in. It's a terrible shape for our hands. And prolonged usage will cause some damage. Has anybody ever seen like the original mouse where this basic shape comes from?
No.
Let me pull up a picture here. So it's back in the 60s. I'm not exactly sure which year. I think the later half of the 1960s when he invented it. But the engineer had the idea, started putting components together, testing little devices, and there was coming at a convention, and he just he needed a case for all his stuff. And well, I guess I clicked the image button, but this picture right here, here it goes. And he just happened to have this wooden box in his office on his desk or something that was about the size of his hand, and all those components would fit inside of. So that's why he picked that shape, and it never really changed. We still go with it. And like I was pointing out, in order to hold this and to use it, we have to change. That's not, we can't hold it and use it with the same hand posture. And little things like that, that's not a really good shape for the hand. Over time, that causes some damage. There are better shapes for the hands. Vertical mouse is a much better shape for the hand. Anybody ever seen use one of these before?
Wow. Oh, no.
You can kind of see it there. But if you just hold your hand out in the relaxed position, it's going to try to sit like that, right? So instead of having this weird box thing where hands like half flat and extra fingers are just stretched out of the way, it's more in a relaxed position where our hand curves slightly, the thumb points towards the fingers, and it's a better shape for the hand. So over prolonged usage, that will make a big difference. Trackball mouses are also better for the hand. It's hard to see in that picture. Is there a better picture? I guess you can kind of see in this picture. The mouse sits still, and there's just like a little ball under your thumb that you use that moves.
Oh God, yeah, I love mine. I mean, I've got one on my machine downstairs that I ride the bike on, and I'm having to use the mouse, and just one hand is flipped around, and as long as it doesn't get linty, I mean, then I've got to manage to take it apart and get all the lint out. But
yeah, I don't see a good picture, but those are really good. A lot of people that do a lot of CAD work kind of like the trackball mouses, and it's much better for the hand because our hand sits in a relaxed position, a relaxed natural position, and it's our thumb that's moving. And our thumb is one of those things that we can move that all day long and never wear it out. So it can take a lot more. The next thing I was going to point out was the keyboard. I forgot to bring it down. My extra keyboard sitting upstairs, but I'm here on my laptop, and I think everybody knows what a laptop keyboard looks like, right? It's very flat, well, sitting perfectly flat at whatever level, the same angle as the thing it's underneath of, so usually flat like a desk. You can do little bits of things. If you weren't familiar with the original keyboard, they just wired up a typewriter. The typewriters were originally set up so that the gears wouldn't jam. When they had physical gears, they tried to organize it so that letters that often get used together aren't next to each other. That way there would be some spacing between those gears so they wouldn't get caught on each other. And then in the late 40s, when they needed an input device, they just kind of started with a typewriter and added some wiring to it. And it worked, and we've kind of stuck around with that. But that's one of the notoriously bad ones. Like, everybody's probably heard of carpal tunnel, right? That's a big one in our society. We hear about it all the time. Or carpal tunnel syndrome. Carpal tunnel itself is the tube but all the nerves from your hand run through to get to send signals back to your brain. And if any damage happens to that tube, my understanding is that when that tube's damaged, your brain just constantly receives a pain signal from the hand. So no matter what you do, it's like your body is always telling your brain that your hand hurts.
Yeah, I
That
got
is-
carpal tunnel in both hands.
Yeah, I've heard it's bad.
It
There's
is.
little things you can do. One thing you want to do is like the armrest that lifts your hand up. That helps a lot. Because the thing is, like on my laptop keyboard where it's sitting flat, it's so easy to keep my hand flat, kind of like this, and move the fingers up and down. Ideally, you want to kind of have curved fingers and, like on a piano, be pushing straight down, not push straight down as much as you can. But those little armrests that lift your arm up, those help quite a bit with preventing carpal tunnel. Or if it's already started to set in, like it has for many people in our society, the special like gloves, not really a glove because your fingers are exposed, but it locks your wrist in place, and sort of a brace. Those help a little. But just like with the mouse, they make some nice keyboards. I'm going to look for Ergonomic Keyboard. There's probably a lot of pictures here.
About the keyboard that has the like pad in front of it or something. Yeah.
Somewhat with that. You can kind of see it here.
Yeah.
But, well, like the flat keyboard, I have to hold my hand out straight like this. I can do the little things like twist my fingers so they go straight down instead of like flopping. And that helps a little. But it's that holding our hands flat like this, because the natural relaxed position is more like this, right? We just relax our arms. I'll hold it like this, and if I just relax, my hands turn like this. So ideally, that's the shape we want our hands to be in.
Well, that explains why we had these god-awful things on the keyboards when we moved into a brand new clinic, the last place I worked. And
Yeah,
we couldn't
those
know
little,
why did they do that?
pads.
Because the idea was that we were supposed to have our hands, a different way. And we were so used to doing it the way we did it. Well, this thing just gets in the way.
Yeah.
We were supposed to be doing something different, but nobody ever told us. They just bought the things and put them there. That they got us standing tables, or they
if you have a flat keyboard, you raise your arms up like that to adjust for it. But these other ones, you keep your hand in the relaxed position, so they're angled up in the middle. Even better is where there's two halves of a keyboard, like this one here, and then you can just set those in good positions, and they won't wear out your body quite so quick.
I've never even seen those two halves.
Those are really useful.
I've never seen one of those.
Those are going to be real nice with the last thing we look at on this list here. But it's much better for your body, because if you're in this room listening to this lecture right now, you're planning on sitting at a desk working on a computer, and that's going to take that's going to just do some damage to your body.
Can you scroll up? I seen a keyboard way at the top that was really interesting in it. Let me see. Go down a little bit. Oh, there it is. It's the second one it says $398. It's up at the shopping right there. What is that one right there?
It's split. So it's kind of hard to tell, but it's spread far apart so that your arms will be on an armrest. So it's much wider than your normal keyboard. So that your arms are going to be all the way out on an armrest. I guess I have to lean back to see
And then
it.
your thumbs do those keys look like towards the middle?
Then your hands turn like this. So it's curved like that, so that your hands are turned like this, spread out, resting on arms. So a really good shape. There's some really expensive ones, but it's like the right tool for the right job. If you're planning on doing this, the people that sit at a desk and work on computers all the time make pretty good money. And if you're going to be doing that 30 to 60 hours a week, it might be well worth it to buy a really nice keyboard and a really nice mouse. That way you don't damage your body from doing those things. Those are some of the ones. They have lots of different shapes. Some of them get more exaggerated, kind of fit with our hand. There's another one I want to point at. Some like this. Some of these really odd looking ones where things are set up more.
You almost have to
spirally.
relearn how to type then, don't you?
Yes. On some of those extreme ones, you'd have to relearn how to type. But these weren't made.
Well, I
these
can't
weren't made
type
by an
anyway,
artist.
Chris, so that works fine for me.
Oh yeah.
I never learned how to touch type, so it's like I'm terrible.
But
So-
these things like this and this one down here, these weren't designed by artists. Those were the ones that actual hand. What's the term for hand doctors? Is that orthopedic?
Orthopedic.
No, it's
No.
it's
No,
another term. It's another
orthopedic.
Specialized term, and who knows? But they.
Yeah,
Let's
I'm
just
drawing
say
a blank on it, but the hand doctors, these are the ones hand doctors designed. So experts in the human hand did proper research and came up with some of these really odd looking spiral circular designs. It's not an artist thing.
But you could probably find, like, if I wanted to get something like that one that was, you could probably find one that costs less that does the same thing, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be, because that would be, I wouldn't want to pay that much, not even knowing if I could even type on that thing. But you see right there where your
Oh,
cursor
yeah.
is now, there's another white one that looks kind of like that, where, you know, maybe I'd probably want to try it out because that's a little too steep for.
Yeah, they make much cheaper ones. If you search, like I just did a random search, so doing a random search for that, it's going to assume, Google's going to assume that I already know I want one, so it's going to show the really nice ones. But there are much cheaper ones. Yeah, they're reasonably priced ones. But it's, I just wanted to point these things out because it's, sitting at a desk takes a big toll on the human body. We're actually dynamic creatures, so sitting at a chair, only moving our fingers is a terrible, terrible thing to do to our bodies. Like somebody that works construction, they're going to have a lot more of those little accident injuries and stuff. But in the long run, by the time we reach retirement age, they're going to be in much better shape because they've moved their body the whole time. Then they use their body more like it's supposed to be used. It's something to keep in mind. You've probably heard of this word before, ergonomics, right? Yeah. Those pictures had it. I was going to go to the Wikipedia page. They have a picture that shows it, but it's been used a lot in business because it improves productivity. But that's what it is. It's just better for our bodies so we can sit and do the stuff. Kind of like the bad versions where you're slouched over or have a weird angle looking at your screen. Those are kind of bad. There's some pictures on here that kind of show the best positions. You want to try to be looking straight at the screen. Arm position makes a big difference. All these pictures I'm looking at, they all have the flat arm thing going on. So if you have a flat keyboard, armrest can make a big difference as far as prolonged comfort. Y'all can look through some of that, but yeah, it's kind of like think about the standing position, but really the best ones, if you're going to be doing computer stuff day in and day out for an entire working career, you might want to think about a good keyboard and mouse. And those are the best ones are the ones that fit the relaxed position of our body. So instead of a flat keyboard, our hands relax and Think about that natural shape of your body. And same thing with the vertical mouse. Beyond that is also just the workstations. These pictures are showing some terrible desks, right? Those are not nice desks, just the traditional shape. Standing desks are a little bit better, but I think one of the biggest effects of standing desk is we move around more. We're more likely to walk around the office and stuff and come back and do things. Does anybody know what the best position for humans to work in is? Have you heard this before?
I'm going to guess lying down, but I'm just guessing.
Yeah. Zero gravity. Real zero gravity. Car dealers started calling something zero gravity, which doesn't make any sense because this is the zero gravity position.
That is so
That would be
awesome.
incredibly dangerous to put that in a car. So I don't know what car dealers call
I
zero
hate
gravity.
to say this, but that looks like a dentist chair, and I don't want to sit in a dentist chair anytime soon.
This is the best shape for our bodies. These things are not cheap. They have some chairs that aren't too bad. You get a chair and workstation, but if you have that laid back position, maybe the split keyboard, so you have a different keyboard on each hand and all the good, a lot of good equipment, it's much better for your body over time. Yeah, like some of the chairs aren't as bad as some of the desks. Some of the desks are real fancy. Like this one, these are the Scorpions. I don't know if that one does, but most of the ones from that brand, they like actually move, like the thing grows and extends around you and all the stuff moves into place. Looks very futuristic. But sitting at the traditional desk, working on the regular cheap keyboards with that generic box shape of a mouse that no thought was put into when they created it, it kind of damages your body over time. So you want to keep things like that in mind, right? If you're gonna, these jobs also pay a lot, so affording the right tools isn't quite that bad. There's different types, and yeah, obviously a regular keyboard works fine, but it's just that long-term damage. It's not a great way for our bodies to move, and over time it causes more and more and more damage. I think that was everything I wanted to mention there. I like to bring that up in every class that I teach because it's all computer stuff. So if you're taking a class from me, you're probably planning on sitting at a desk for many, many hours a week doing computer stuff, and the human body should be dynamic. And if you don't get enough movement, it takes a really bad toll on your body. Your body just, it's like parts of your body will start giving up on you because it's like your body decides it doesn't need certain parts, and it causes a lot of long-term damage. So keep things like that in mind. It's the right tool for the right job. Good tools, I guess. Anybody have any questions about that? Y'all can look at that stuff. It's usually, if you look under the word, start with the word ergonomic and search for other things, you'll see a lot of options. And those, yeah, there's an extensive list. That's, I didn't want to take more than 20 minutes on it. There's a whole lot more equipment than that, a whole lot of other shapes that aren't quite to the extreme. I just kind of pulled up the ones that are the extreme shapes. So there's some middle ground things too that are more like a normal keyboard, but slightly better, where they're not as likely to hurt your body over time. Okay, so I guess that means there's no questions. We'll move on to the next thing on the list today. What time is it? 1:25. But we'll get started on this, take a break, then come back and finish it. So what we've seen so far is a whole lot of putting stuff on the page. Right? It doesn't really change. We put the words on the page, and the words on the page are there because we, the programmers, put them there. Right? We encoded them in the HTML and styled them up with CSS, and that's where they go. But as y'all are probably well aware of, there's another aspect to web pages that we haven't really looked at yet. Sounds like a chainsaw's running next door. Can y'all hear that? Is background? Sorry about the background noise. Well, just right here on Google itself, the search bar, a place to type into. The things we can interact with and do stuff. I believe everybody's probably seen them, right? We call those form elements for HTML. The boxes we can type into, the buttons we can click on, the check boxes and radio buttons and color pickers, and I think that's most of what I have on the list for today. Whoops, that's not what I meant to click. But HTML form elements, the things that accept user input. And let's see what I have in my notes. So we're just going to look at some of the form elements today. I believe it's week 7. We're going to look a little bit about scripting. The textbook covers a little bit about JavaScript, just a very brief introduction to it. Along with that, and we'll do a little bit more in class, and along with that, probably look at a very brief PHP script, something on the server side, just a basic thing. So we won't be doing a whole lot with the forms except putting them there. Those are each their own separate class, but yeah, so this is basically setting up the forms, the places to type into and buttons to click on and all of that stuff. And we'll see a little bit of scripting. Most of that will come later. Mostly we're just going to focus on putting the things how they look. And I think it's week 7. It might be Wednesday of week 6 that we'll get to that, but still not far off, right? We're over halfway through the semester already. 8 weeks goes very, very quickly. So these are things to get user input. Go ahead and set up a new HTML page to kind of work with this. All that familiar stuff we've seen many times. Head tag, a body tag for the stuff that's going to show. And we'll be doing stuff mostly in the body tag today. I'll go ahead and save this. I guess it needs some sort of name. I'll call it Feb17.html. Wait, that's not a good name. I'll just call it forms. Forms.html, because that's what we'll be doing. Should also give a good name for the CSS sheet. I'll call the style sheet the same thing. We're only going to very briefly look at styling, but I'll go ahead and link that together. So I'll make forms.html and forms.css to go over this stuff. And then some of the other things we've seen before, right? Like we're going to be working in the English language. We usually want to have some sort of title on here. Form examples / title. A link to that CSS sheet I just set up. It's a style sheet, and it's located in the same folder at forms.css. Maybe some metadata. Our textbook really likes that one where the name equals viewport. Content is width equals device width, initial scale equals 1.0. That doesn't do anything anymore. That one was created with the iPhone, and for a decade or so, a bunch of other, so it was before the HTML standard, but it was necessary for the iPhone for about a decade or so. And other things just did stuff with it, but the iPhone doesn't even use it anymore. And they were kind of the last one to stop using it. So our book really likes that tag, but it doesn't do anything anymore. And for the last 5 or 6 years, it's only done stuff on the iPhone. So one we might want, description is a lot more useful, because when the search engine bots go out and find our page, it's going to return a description of our page. And we put that in a metadata tag as well. The name is description, and content is a description of what the page is. Basically, what you put in the content attribute is what will show in the search results. Right? If we search for something, I'll point out something. Well, after we do forms, we're going to look quickly at this today. You can see this, it's the results there aren't reading words off the page. Sometimes we have things that are just words off the page. We can usually tell because there's, it just shows parts of them. It just kind of breaks off at the end or the beginning. And those are just words off the page. But here, it gives a very detailed description of what's on the page. That one still breaks off at the end. But that's what goes in the content page, content of the description meta tag. So like a class example demonstrating HTML form elements. And just, yeah, write up a short description. You don't want it to be very long. Y'all have, I assume everybody in here has seen how much room you have in search engine results. But a detailed description that will fit in those search results is what you're looking for there. That's a much more useful one than the viewport that doesn't do anything and hasn't done anything since the iPhone 8, I believe. And we're on 12? I don't use iPhones. I think it's iPhone 12 now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's been 4 iPhones since that tag even did anything, and everything else had kind of quit using it before then. So in our body tag, we need a place to type stuff. I'm going to go ahead and open this up before I start adding things on the page. This one. So as was probably expected, right now it's just a blank page. But we can add some stuff to it. In particular, the thing we're looking at today is, well, user interface. That's the term that's the generic catch-all term for these things. A place for the user to interact with. So far, we've only seen words that we put on the page, but we might need a place to get words from the user. So our most basic one is just an input tag. I'm going to erase this, but I'm just going to start with this right here. Just the input tag, open and close. It's not quite enough to do much with, but you can see that's just a basic text thing. Now that we have a box to enter text in. Text goes here. And pretty much all of our inputs are the input tag. We change that by changing the type of it. Well, it'll be a minute before we get to scripting and anything where we can save that. Week 6 or 7, we're going to look briefly at some scripts where we can write that to a text file or something. Change some words somewhere else on the page based off what the user enters. Some very basic ones here, but really that stuff comes in later class. We just want to have a good idea of how to put user interfaces together in HTML pages before we get to those classes. That way in those classes, we can just focus on the scripting and doing stuff when the user gives us some data. But we would change this with the type attribute, for example, color. It's still an input element, and just the type is color. Right, reload, and we get this basic color picker. Kind of like what we saw, a smaller version of what we saw, like we just put color picker in Google to get colors. You see there's our RGB value. Click the little arrows, there's the hue, saturation, luminosity, the hex code, and back to the RGB. So with no other specifications in there, we get those 3 big ones: the RGB, the HSL, and the hex.
So on those colors right there, if you know those numbers, if you look, up like you said for a specific logo and you had those numbers, would you be able to enter those there? Are those spaces formable, or is that just where it would tell you the information? Okay.
Like this? Yeah,
That's
we can type
exactly
in there.
what I was wondering.
Yeah, we can type in there and find the color. I was going to put that at the end, and I just needed something to something other than the text one. It seemed like a good thing for that. But I really like this one for picking colors, like putting a design together on the page, because you can put that color picker there and see the color next to your other colors. And you don't have to keep it in the page, right? It's just like a little sample of that color that you can see next to the rest of your color palette, the color palette on your site, and make comparisons of those colors when you pick them. So I really like that one for that purpose.
Just on it and number is what the code was for it.
I'm sorry, what?
So we wouldn't have to store that anywhere because the code stays in the color. So if I have to go back to remember it, you just look at it.
Yes, because I hit reload, it goes back to black. So when we get to scripting, we can pull the numbers out of there. But yeah, usually what I do most often with this one is, we'll have a bunch of colors there on the page. So when we pick a color from the picker, we can see that little sampling of the color next to the rest of the color palette we have selected. And then when I don't need it anymore, just kind of delete it. So we choose the input with the type attribute. So I just wanted to show something else to get back to this one. So when we have that most generic one, the just text input, I like to go ahead and specify that it is a text input. That way it matches everything else, because all of them are inputs. And if all of them except one have that attribute spelled out, that one kind of stands out uniquely. It looks out of place. And when things look out of place, it makes it harder to find issues. When everything, we'll see it in a moment when we have a bunch of tags here. You probably noticed it some. If we're careful and somewhat organized and consistent with how we write our code, like little patterns start to form in the text documents, almost like little geometric shapes where you can let your eyes go out of focus and you'll see little shape outlines in the text. And that is one way to spot when things get have gone wrong, because those patterns will be broken. That's not a surefire way to narrow things down, but it can be helpful. We'll notice patterns in the text, and then it really stands out when they don't quite look right. So for our purposes here, I'm going to put a bunch of inputs together for examples here. But we probably want to put those inside of something. So our standard thing to put them inside of is going to be a form element. And the reason I'm going to look at it very quickly here, we'll come back and look at this when we've seen scripting, is a form. The form element, the browser knows it's going to do something. So we have these two attributes that we can call in, an action attribute and a method attribute. So like our action is what script do we want to run? So maybe we want to run some, whoops, spelled that wrong. Have something called my script, just a script we have with these files that does something with the information on this form. So that whenever we hit the submit button on the form, it's going to run this script. And then the method is how does it run the script? And that's either going to be get or post. We will talk about those in week 7 when we write a small script to do stuff with. So for now, just be aware that the browser knows a form element will do something. So it has these action and method attributes. So whenever we start putting our user interfaces for web pages together, which is what lab time today is kind of really should be spent on, just making them look nice and seeing what all's there, getting a little practice with that. Remember to put them inside of a form element, because then the submit button will do something. Which is a special kind of button. Might as well put that in here. So in this form, one of our inputs that's probably going to go at the bottom has type equal submit. And slash input. So an input that is a submit button. There's also a reset button, which is very, very useful. And I'll go ahead and put that, I'll put it on the next line. Input type equals reset. And those two, it should be obvious what they do, right? The submit button will do whatever script, run whatever script we specified in the action attribute of the form. And the reset button will just clear the form out. Actually do a text input to show that real quick. Just a basic input. And for good measure, since every other input will have the type attribute spelled out, it can be a good idea to go ahead and spell out the text attribute as well. So if I start putting things in there and hit the reset button, it's going to do exactly what you expect it to. It clears out all the information in the form. So those two are very, very useful. But notice there's no line breaks here. It just put those right next to them. They don't have a line break by default. That's because oftentimes we will have boxes and labels and things next to each other. So what I like to do is wrap them in paragraphs. I guess there's different options. You could set the CSS display property to something with line breaks. I think block would work. There are a couple different display properties.
That's why I was having to manually put in the BR, because when I was doing the paragraphs, I only did I do that top one and then I just put the ending one at the at the end.
Yeah, so it's there's only a couple of elements that naturally have line breaks. So personally, I like to use those all the time and almost never use the BR tag. Part of that is because the last 3 or 4 times they've worked on a new version of the standard, they try to remove the BR tag and then always add it back in at the last moment. Kind of like I pointed out the slash there at the end of the standalone tags, that and the break tag, every time they write the next edition of the standard, they try to remove those, but it would cause some major backward compatibility issues. But eventually they might find a way to remove them from the standard. So you probably want to avoid, well, you want to include that slash, because every other markup language, it has to be there.
And don't use the BRs,
And
use the
don't use
period.
the BR.
Okay.
Yeah, use the styles, use some of the CSS rules to add line breaks and things. Yeah, so that, I usually just use the paragraph. List also works well. The list item, LI tag, that also has a line break built into it. Our textbook really likes that one. Another thing I mentioned is labels, right? So here's a spot to type into, but what goes in there? So we have another tag that kind of fits nicely with that, which is the label tag. And there's an attribute that we really need to include here. I'll make sure I put it in the right spot. And that is the for attribute. So we have to say what this label is for. And in order to do that, we need a name or an ID or something, which a label is going to be for a unique thing. So we really want that for the name value. Or, well, either one. I'll go ahead and put them both here. Probably ID is the one you want to match with it. The thing is, when we get to scripting, the server-side scripts will use almost exclusively the name attribute. And the client-side scripts will often use mostly the ID attribute. So it can be a really good idea to put them both in. So like text, I'll call this text in 1. I might add another one in a moment. That's a 1. And we can give them the same name and ID. Text in 1. And that way, just a couple attributes. I can stretch this out a little. Typically, the server-side script wants the name of the input box, and the client-side script wants the ID. And if we had the label tag, that needs to refer to the ID. So we say that label is for that particular input box. And then the entire input element will get wrapped with the label. So the closing label tag goes all the way over here. Which I always found a little counterintuitive. If the thing completely surrounds the input box, that's not what I think of as label. But the input box gets entirely nested in the label. And then right before the input box, we put what the label is. So, I don't know, text input 1. Something like that. Random words to show what it is. And then it will keep that label and input box affiliated together. I typically drift away from that myself. It's part of the standard, so it's a good idea to see it. But personally, I usually just set some words there next to it. Something like this. Text input 2 is going to be another input box. But type.
Okay, because looking at the text, it looked like they kept them separate. You had the label line and then you had the input, the label and input. They had them on separate lines. I thought.
Oh,
Maybe I
yes.
misread them.
It would probably look a whole lot better if I separated it like this.
Okay, so maybe I just misread it because I know I ran stuff and it ran okay. It looked like it ran okay. And I didn't get any, I don't think I got any errors. Maybe I didn't check it yet.
If I make this code look a little bit nicer like this, is that what you were talking about, Joe?
No, it looked like, and maybe I just misread the book, and unfortunately the book's in the other room, that the label line was all in one line, period, and then the input was right after it. Okay, well, let me fix that.
The label will need nested inside there.
Oh, okay.
Or I'll do a couple of them. It'll look very similar. Here was one, I was doing one without it here. So in that input and then in the paragraph.
Okay.
So you can see it looks very, very similar. The big difference is there's no way to uniquely identify, whoops, not that button. Function F12, there we go. Here when I start hovering over things in the form, you'll see that there it's all tied together, the label, the input, and everything. And here, those words don't, there's not a identifier for them. There's no tag on them or anything. You're talking about, is this what you were referring to? With the label here, then close the label tag.
Yeah, that's what it looked like. It looked like in the book, although I might have screwed that up looking at it.
Whoops, I accidentally closed the page. It will look about the same.
I did it.
So the difference, again, is when we go to identify it, open the inspector back up and do the hover thing. This one. You can see they're separate. So here on the first one, that label and input are considered the same thing the whole way through. Whereas here, there's the label. The label is just like another, that's just a tag for text. So when we nest the input inside of there, then we get that connecting value. And if we put them separate, then we just have two separate things that we have to style separately. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so as normal, there's lots of ways we can get the same results. As you can see, it looks the same either way, and the difference is in the background. And sometimes that background stuff makes a big difference. I also wasn't making a big deal out of labels because I almost never use labels anymore. If I open like the Ivy Learn site. We usually see stuff like this, right? The hint text. A lot of times the label will go right there. This one still has the sign-in label, but some sort of hint usually goes in there. And anymore, it's become very, very popular to use that hint as the label. So I'll do that here. So input.
What did you say that hint is for again? I'm sorry.
Whatever we want it to be. It's just some grayed out words that are there if there's nothing else.
Okay,
and
that's something the book doesn't have. So you're going to teach us something.
Oh.
Okay, so here.
I noticed the typo on the line above. And then we have it's called a placeholder attribute. So placeholder equals text input, text in 3. So yeah, the placeholder attribute is that sort of grayed out text that just shows in the box. And then when we start typing, that disappears. So I like to put labels there, personally. Like one box will say first name in that grayed out text, and then last name, phone number, and put it in the grayed out text.
So that way you don't even have a nested in a label tag because it's all in one big hairy deal, and it's probably more descriptive.
Yes.
And it takes up less space.
Yes. And yeah, I feel like I see that a lot more in forms anyway, so it's more consistent.
Placeholder, okay.
Yeah, and I went back, I forgot to add the for attribute in the other label because I was wanting to point at stuff. So I added that for attribute in. If I hover over these now, so there's the first one. And here, yeah, you can see even with when it says what it's for, it doesn't include it the same way as nesting the labels does. Nesting them in there kind of connects the label and the input box as a single thing. But personally anymore, I started doing it because I felt like I kept seeing it in forms. I used the placeholder attribute to specify what it is. And then those submit and reset buttons, which I'm going to take this line break out. Those can go on the same line without any trouble. And then that gets, the most basic type of user interface. 3 boxes to enter text in, whichever way you want to put the labels together. It'll be fine because here we're just learning how to set these up and make user interfaces look nice. That way when y'all get to the scripting classes, because it's an entire class for each one that follows this up, you won't have to spend time there learning how to put a form together. You'll have practiced that here.
Can you use placeholder and the labels at the same time? So like, for instance, if you put name and then you put gray and as a placeholder, you put Jane Doe, or for social security number, you put XXX dash. Okay.
So placeholder equals enter stuff here. And along with placeholder, might as well throw this one. I'll put it in the second one. We also have a value attribute, and that's what goes in there as default text. I'll just put those words.
Okay, so yeah, that's what I was actually kind of concerned about. If somebody didn't put that right value, like, for date of birth or whatever, so you would be able to say this is text and this is number.
Yeah, so the value is like the default text, because notice if I put my cursor here, I have to actually erase that text to type anything different.
Okay,
so
you would put default text in if there was a very standard thing that somebody almost always uses, so they don't have to type anything. And if they need to change it, they change it.
Yes. For example, I recently had to go on the Clarksville town website. I live in Clarksville, and on a form for the thing I was doing there, it had the address spot. Well, they already had Clarksville and the zip code for Clarksville filled in as default text, because they assume that if anybody's going to the Clarksville town site, they probably live in Clarksville, right? So in that case, if you expect to know what it is, you can go ahead and put a value there. And the placeholder is just background stuff. It goes away when we start typing. And again, the reset button clears stuff out, and the submit input runs the script that we put in the action attribute of the form, which we haven't quite done yet. We'll see that, I think, week 7. I think Monday, week 7. It might be Wednesday of week 6.
I think on the assignment for chapter 9.
Yeah, for the
Yeah,
one in
for
the
chapter,
textbook.
they give us a script to throw in.
Yes,
the
they give
book.
you a website. You'll just put action equals that web
They're
address
their
they
little
give
blob,
you.
their little
And the
blobby.
only thing, the only thing on that web address is a PHP script. So when you click
Right,
that link, the script runs and sends back a response.
right, and all that stuff. Okay, yeah, because I know they do talk about that. I played with it. That's how I know how. That's how I knew how to screw it up. So I fixed it.
Yeah, so we will see a basic script. What I was going to do is put some text stuff, and then write to a file with a server-side script, and probably click some buttons to change colors or something for the client-side script. I usually make that one up off the top of my head whenever we do the class, because I like to see how people react to what you all know. Like either last spring or the spring before when I taught this class, everybody that showed up that day, it might have been nasty weather or something. There's only like 3 or 4 people, and I knew that everybody that made it to class the day we did scripting had a lot of programming already, so we did something really complicated. There's another time when I taught the class, it was just a simple thing, just to change, like we changed one color at the click of a button. The other one was a game that kept scores and all sorts of nice stuff. So when we get to that lecture, I'll kind of see where you all are at with as far as programming, figure out what we're going to do. So yeah, that's the basic idea. One other type of text, I'll go ahead and put it here as well. I still put it in paragraph tag just to get those line breaks. This is the one that we're going to look at today that's not an input, and that is the text area tag. Well, I'll just do it with nothing special in it right now. So the start and end for the tag, and that gives us text area with multiple lines and word wrap, and we can stretch it out to the size we need. So for something like that, you probably want to have a width and a height attribute. And it's rows and columns as far as the text editor. So the width number is how many characters are there. So like 45 characters wide, and height is how many rows of text there are. Height, I don't know, 20 lines. That put something. Oh wait, that's rows and calls. Sorry, not height and width. Rows and columns, which should make more sense to what I just said. Okay. So 45 here. I did 45 rows and 20 columns. I think I'm meant to do that the other way. So 45 columns wide and 20 rows tall. This is a nice little area to type text in. And if I start typing here, whoops, you'll see that a lot of stuff is already available. Well, you can see the word wrap there, right? So word wrap works. If I hold down Shift key, I can select stuff, hit Control Copy, go to the end. Enter works. Pasting works. So Control C for copy, Control V to paste, Control Z to undo. And if I come down a little,
can you press Control Z a few times so I can see how that works?
Control Z? That's
you said
undo.
Control Z is undo. Does it only do the last digit you typed, or does it?
It does the exact same thing as if you have an undo button on a. So if the last thing you did was paste, it'll undo the paste. So exactly the same as hitting the undo button if you're on some sort of software. And you can see a scroll bar automatically shows up. So that one's kind of nice for putting forms together. It's a text area, and let's see, reset that. You can see the placeholder attribute kind of works the same. If we want to, we can put words in between, or the value attribute will do the same thing. Default words. You can put, well, notice the value doesn't do anything. So to do that, we have to actually put it in between the tags. So between our opening and closing tag, type in some default words. I'm going to hit enter a couple times. And notice that line break here did transfer through. Usually our line break doesn't come with us. So if you want like several lines of text for the default, you just put those, like actually put the line breaks in between the tags. One of the few places where white space does matter in HTML. But usually if we want a text area, we want a blank text area, right? We're doing that because we want just this big empty spot that somebody can type into. Yeah, so we have some more to look at. One last thing before we take a break. Actually, I'll do it after we take a break. That's probably good because there's going to be like 3 parts to it. But that's our basic text input. So we have our most basic input is just text. But every other type of input, we specify the type attribute. So for consistency, it's a really good idea to include the text. And for the most part, you're going to want to have a name and an ID. Most often client-side scripting, we use the ID in a tag. And most often in the server-side scripting, we use the name. So often we'll want both. You'll want both of them in your user interface elements or your form elements. 208. So I have some more things to look at, but it looks like it's probably a good time for a break, right? We've been at this for a minute. 10 minutes sound good? Okay, yeah, I think yes. So yeah, 209, it'll be 20, the clock's probably gonna roll around. So let's meet back here at 2:20, and then we'll look at some more form elements and follow that up with CSS variables. And after, yeah, then have plenty of lab time so that y'all can play around with making these making user interface forms look nice. And we'll see that after the break. So I will see y'all in a few minutes. Stop recording.